Hey there. It's good to be with you at a different time than our normal 8:30 Eastern for our get-togethers at that point, but glad to be here with you. Thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule to come and hang out with me for a little bit. Um, we're obviously in probably one of the most unusual times that any of us has ever experienced. And we've gone through quite a bit here, whether it's blackouts or the horrific uh, events of 9/11, hurricanes, you name it. I mean, as a country, we have our share of crises and difficult times. And this, I guess, is probably right up there in terms of the effect that it has on us. And, I've been reading and seeing a lot of reports over the past week or so of just some of the difficulties that people have been having dealing with it. I mean, yeah, it's a situation where there's a percentage of people who actually have the disease, and there's a percentage that are suffering greatly and even dying from it. But by and large, the vast majority of people in our country, we're dealing with the effects of being told we can't do anything or go anywhere, or we can't work. So I've been, seeing a lot of reports about how difficult this time frame has been for many folks. And I just felt really prompted this morning to just put a little something together to hopefully bring some help, some hope, some common sense. I don't know. Let me make it very clear. I am not a professional in the sense of a medical professional or a licensed psychologist. I mean, my background is in psychology, but I don't have credentials as you might expect. But what I do have is some passion for these subjects, and I have studied and looked at what is available, what's out there, what the potentials are. And of course, most of you know that as a Christian, I believe that in these kinds of circumstances that God always has an answer. And so I'm just going to share some thoughts with you. In no way am I prescribing or even suggesting beyond just offering some ideas for you to look at. And if you find some benefit in that, or perhaps you might know someone who would benefit, feel free to pass it along. So we want to talk tonight about how we can actually move past our grief, our anxiety that is just so prevalent in times like this, right? So when we think about crisis is any sort of a sudden change that rocks our normal, whatever normal has been, right? A crisis will shake that, will shock us, it will greatly disturb us. In some cases, it can be so traumatic that it results in post-traumatic syndrome, which, if it goes beyond 30 days, becomes a disorder. So, many, many things can qualify or come under this definition of crisis. And by and large, when we are in a crisis moment or a crisis situation, we, we experience fear and grief. These are natural and normal reactions because we're just human, right? So, what does it mean when we're in a crisis and we begin to have this fear? Well, generally it falls into these two particular areas. The first is a separation anxiety because our normal is no longer there, right? We have been used to a certain routine. We get up, we go to work, whatever it might be. Well, that routine is gone. And the fact that there is no routine for some people can be extremely unnerving. You just feel like, well, who am I? Where am I? What am I supposed to do? Because your normal routines are no longer in place. And along with that is this fear of the unknown. Well, what is this going to be like now? How long is it going to last? What's going to happen to me? All these different kinds of fears come up as a result of a crisis situation that we find ourselves in. One person used this particular analogy, which I thought was very appropriate, that it feels like you're one of these acrobats on the trapeze, and you've let go your swing, and you're hoping that somebody's out there to catch you. I mean, it can have that kind of a, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? And so when we have these kinds of fears, our brain is just screaming, there's something wrong, right? We can't even control that sort of a reaction sometimes because our brain is, again, just processing all this new stuff. And it is just literally shouting at us that there's something wrong. and it really can feel like our reality is so altered. And the reason for that is that, our brains are wired in such a way that they rely on context. Our brains feel comfortable and secure when things are as they should be. And so when that goes away, when things happen, all of a sudden, the context is gone and we feel discomfort, we feel anxiety. It's not fun. It really isn't. So the other major reaction oftentimes in these sort of situations is grief. And this is defined as keen mental suffering or distress over affliction or loss, sharp sorrow, painful regret. All of these can fall under the definition of grief. Now, maybe you're sitting there going, well, grief, why would grief be part of a reaction to crisis? Well, it's basically because in a grief reaction, you sorry, went to the wrong slide. Basically what's happening is that we are actually kind of in mourning. We just feel sad because things aren't like they used to be. And in our case, in this particular situation, there's a grieving over the loss of normalcy, of being able to do what we normally could do. It's like, I'm trapped. This is horrible. I miss my life as it was. And that can become a grieving that we go through. Anxiety is, again, part and parcel of all of this. Distress, uneasiness of mind that's caused by fear of danger or misfortune. So when we want to, look at this in terms of how we may be responding, or perhaps folks that we know may be responding, with respect to the grief side of it, we got to realize it's normal, okay? When our world gets shaken and rocked by a crisis and our normal goes away, right, that's going to create a sad situation in some folks, may not be in you. I know I didn't react this way to it, but I do know others that they are definitely feeling that sadness over the fact that my life is nothing now compared to what it was, right? So what we need to do, though, is we need to actually acknowledge that that's how we feel. It's interesting how so many folks generally are not as self-aware as they could be. In other words, you just kind of go through your day and, you're feeling down, but you haven't really named it, right? You haven't really acknowledged this is what I'm feeling. I feel like I could be getting depressed here. Whatever it is, right? Recognizing it, accepting it, and processing, right? If we don't try to process it in some way, then that emotion actually gets trapped in our bodies and can create all kinds of havoc with respect to our health. As you can see here, physical weakness, pain, digestive issues. These are all symptoms of unprocessed emotion that needs to be dealt with. You need to, okay, I recognize I'm sad over what's going on here. Now, what you do with that sadness, see, that's the process part, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. So that's the grief aspect. Anxiety, it's exactly the same. Different emotion, right? Different experience, but anxiety is it's just as important to acknowledge it, to name it and say, wow, I really feel on edge. I'm not feeling very calm right now because of everything that's going on. I mean, people have because, I'm going to get into something here, but people have unfortunately had their fears amplified by the way this all has been presented in the media. And it's a sad thing, but there are folks that literally are so afraid that if they open their front door, they fear somehow being infected and that infection is going to result in their death. Now that's the extreme end of the scale. For many others, it's just simply this uneasy feeling. It's like there's an anxiety that's there that you're kind of like used to, but it's not good. So yeah, you've got to recognize, wow, yeah, I'm not, my level of peace right now, is not where it needs to be and where I want it to be. Because if this is, again, not recognized and accepted and processed, it's going to have the same kinds of symptoms in our physical well-being as grief would. Okay? Physical weakness, pain, digestive issues, all these sorts of things can result from unprocessed anxiety. So with respect to anxiety, what we're typically doing is we're imagining some outcome. And that negative outcome that we picture is really what's driving our fear, our anxiety, our worry. And for a lot of folks right now, it's because, am I going to have enough money if I'm not working? What's it going to be like if in 2 weeks, if this doesn't get, changed, if we don't get back to work? There's all kinds of things along those lines, right? Where you fear a lack of provision, or the isolation aspect of this. There's an anxiety that's there. Say, am I going to be alone in all of this and no one's going to be able to help me if I need help, right? Oh my gosh, there's a lot of folks that are extremely anxious about that sort of thing. And that has horrible impact. It will absolutely weaken the immune system if you stay in that kind of a mindset for too long. So that negative outcome that we're imagining, that's what's driving the anxiety and the fear. So if we're going to navigate this season for as long as it lasts, and believe me, I am one of those who hope and pray that this thing is done with in next month, right? We're at the end here, almost at the end of April. They're talking about May 15th. And I'm like, well, if you can move that up, that'd be great. But we'll see. So however long this situation goes, and even whatever the after effects might be, how long the after effects might be, because, people are saying all kinds of things. But the point is, you need to find some resilience here if you're going to navigate through this season effectively. And I love the definition. Resilience is the ability to recover readily from whether it's illness, depression, adversity, or something similar. And this word here, buoyancy. Oh my goodness. Have you ever been in a pool or maybe the ocean and you had a ball of some kind and you tried to push it down into the water, under the water? That's hard because that thing is really buoyant. The moment you let it go, it's popping up out of the water and it could go pretty high. That's the idea behind resilience. It's like, oh, yes, I'm bouncing back from this. This is not going to hold me down. And that's an absolute possibility for everyone, as long as we look at things, with a realistic, um, sense of okay, this is the situation now. What's possible? All right. So there are three major things that have been identified through research as being what you need if you're going to find that resilience to be able to move through this thing successfully, or really any crisis. The first is self-care. You can see here spirituality and community. These are, again, through research. They've looked at all this, and this is what is necessary. So let's take a look at each one of these really quickly. Self-care, very common sense things, okay? I'm not telling you anything new here. We have to eat healthy. I mean, I know that in this situation, man, it is too easy to hit the snacks and to just be noshing all day long. But that's not going to be good for us either, right? We need fresh air and exercise. Get out as much as you can. And if you're a little concerned, wear the mask. The odds of you contracting this disease from anybody that you might pass, as you're walking is so minuscule, it's not even funny. But for a lot of people, it helps with their anxiety to wear a mask, so feel free to do that. Adequate sleep is huge. And here I am talking about that after having one of the worst night's sleeps of my life last night, but it's very important, okay? Now, here's some things you may not be aware of. There are certain supplements, and again, I am not prescribing or anything of the sort. I am just giving you some information that I have learned that can be helpful. If you want to do your own research and look into it, I would highly recommend that. Supplements like vitamin D, SAM-E, St. John's wort, fish oil, those are actually good for lifting your mood. If you're finding it difficult to get into a better mood, a better place, in your mental, emotional state, these kinds of supplements are very, very helpful in that. Vitamin D, that's the sunshine vitamin. If you can't get out into the sun enough, supplement, right? The guy that prescribes for me, he recommends anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 IU. I'm not prescribing. I'm just telling you it's an important supplement that will help us in this, especially, well, it's actually getting a bit better now that the days are getting longer, warmer. We can get outside and get that vitamin D that we need. 5-HTP and GABA, those are actually good supplements that will help with regulating your anxiety response, right? They're very calming in what they do. So check them out. Go do some research on your own and see if that might be something you'd like to try as an addition to, right? Here's my go-to with this. I know my body needs certain things in order for it to be healthy. And while I'm a praying man and I pray and I know that God answers my prayers, I also know that he wants us to take care of ourselves, all right? So this is part and parcel with that. So the second thing that they found is so important in finding resiliency is connecting with God. It's spirituality. And so that, of course, is right up my alley because that's something that I talk about quite frequently. And in the midst of the change that we're going through, one of the best things we can do is we can always remember that he is unchanging. Things may be flying all over the place and, it just feels like an earthquake, right? Or the ground is just opened up under your feet. All kinds of feelings when crisis hits. But in the midst of it all, he never changes. And that's what these verses tell us, that he is the Lord and he never changes. The Hebrews verse talks about how Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So having that as a foundation, say, okay, God, things are crazy here, but I'm so glad that you're not any different. You are still the same in terms of your love for me and your desire for me to have the best in my life, right? He knows intimately what we're going through, okay? It's like none of this is a surprise to him. He knew this was going to happen, and he's already said, I have what you need. I am what you need, right? This is a beautiful passage here from Hebrews 2, which talks about how Jesus, in becoming a man, he experienced every aspect of humanity, every emotion, every situation that he went through. He did it so that he would know what it's like to be a human being. And so he can identify absolutely with where we are and what we're going through. So that means that we can be honest and vulnerable with him about how we feel. You know what? He is not ever offended by our honesty. And even if that honesty, includes aspects of anger or even hysteria, we can be that open and real with him. I've had times in my life where I have literally screamed at him because of things that happened in my life. Now, in retrospect, those things were my fault, but that's what happens. You just get so stirred up, but it doesn't bother him. So do that. It's cathartic to be able to actually vent how you are feeling and know that he's there listening without judging or condemning, right? Or getting upset and offended. He wants us to be that real with him. As this verse says from 1 Kings 8:39, you alone, Lord, you alone know the hearts of all people. He already knows it. So why not tell him, verbally, just expressing that is going to be, I believe, so freeing for you, because getting it out is a whole lot better than holding it in, right? So that's one thing that we absolutely can do whenever we need to. Then we've got this awesome passage here in Proverbs, which, oh my gosh, when I learned what this really means, it was life-changing. Some of you are probably familiar. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. So in the midst of crisis, when we either can't even find a path or everything seems so jumbled up that you don't know where to go, how to do things, or whatever, here's your go-to. So what is he saying? He's saying, you can trust me. Again, as I said, he knows about all of this. This is no surprise. So he's already made provision for you and I in these kinds of situations. So our first response should be, okay, Lord, I'm going to trust you here because you've told me that you love me. The Bible says that very clearly. And maybe you've had that experience as well, so that you no longer have to simply believe he loves you, but you know it now because you've experienced it. So that's our starting point. Then from there, we want to not try to figure this all out by ourselves with our human brain and understanding. Obviously, he gave us a brain, so we can engage in some of that. But you just might be the kind of person who tends to overthink things. And you're constantly thinking about this and that, and you're second guessing. Please. That, when I used to do that, it was horrible. It was horrible. And so I learned not to do that. I say, Lord, my mind is going a mile a minute right now. I just need you to speak to me. And so I would take my overactive mind and I would shut it down, or I would put it aside, whatever metaphor works for you. And I'd say, all right, I'm going to stop thinking about that so that I can tune in to what you want to show me or to say to me. And that's what this next thing talks about. In all your ways, acknowledge him. Now, that carries within it the word acknowledge. In the original Hebrew language in which this was written, that word carries within it this picture of us standing in the presence of God and having him, in effect, wrap his arms around us, lay his hands on us, but just in some way, we actually encounter him. It's not just some, flippant intellectual acknowledgement. Okay, God, you're there. No, this is standing there saying, Lord, I need you to touch me. I need you to overwhelm me with your presence. And I'm going to stand here until I receive something from you. And it's in those kinds of moments that he's able to show us where the path is and give us guidance, give us wisdom regarding where to go and how to do these things. But it really it depends on whether or not I make that effort. I make the time to actually spend it with him and say, Lord, I'm going to sit here with you and I'm going to focus my attention on you. If you have a Bible, you open your Bible and just maybe find something that's comforting to read. But you spend that time. And I don't know how long it'll take for you. When you're just starting out, it's probably going to take a little while because you're not used to this. But trust me, if you won't give up and do it regularly, whenever you feel the need, in all your ways, he says. So that could mean anything. Ask for that encounter and let him show you. He may show you a mental image, right? You might drop a word or a phrase or remind you of something else that you just recently heard. He does all kinds of creative ways that he communicates to us. And the key is to realize it's usually the first thing that pops in your mind once you've done this. Okay, God, I'm here. What do you want to show me or say to me? And it pops in that fast. Because he's God. He doesn't need time. He just, bam, there you go. So that's a powerful, powerful tool that we've been given to help us navigate through these kinds of times and receive what he wants to give us, right? Which is that resiliency that we talked about. Another great question to ask in those times with him, what are your purposes for me during this time? Because God always has a purpose for everything. And while he's got wider worldwide purposes, he's got individualized purposes that apply to you and me. So it's a great question to ask him, Lord, what are your purposes for me? What is it that you want me to focus on or to do during this downtime that we have? Excellent question. Then the other of the three needs that we have in crisis is connecting with other people, having a community that we can depend on. And so what does that mean? Well, it means that we've got to make his priority our priority, and his priority always and forever is relationship. He wants relationship with us. He wants us to have a relationship with him and relationship with others. So how do you make it your priority? Well, you've got to look. You've got to decide, who is it in my circle that I need to connect with, right? Because I know they love me or I love them. See, it's learning to creatively connect. Obviously, thank God for technology, right? We have this technology to be able to do videos and FaceTime and all these other kinds of things that are out there, Zoom. So yeah, we need to be intentionally creative to connect with people so that we're not isolating during this particular time. God's priority is relationship, so we need to make that our priority as well and reach out to those that you love, and especially to those that you know love you, because they're the ones that want to strengthen and support and help you. Okay? And God has those for you. I promise you, he has people like that for you. And he'll show you who they are if you're not sure at this point. So these are, again, just some of my thoughts that I wanted to share with you. Hopefully some of this is relevant. Some of this, will help you to do a better job of not getting all, freaked out or beaten down by the circumstances that we find ourselves in. And if you do know of anyone who you think might benefit, feel free to share that with them. And I would love to hear from any of you that, have watched this and have been helped. I don't know if you have any questions. I can certainly stay on for a few more minutes to answer any questions. Well, that's an interesting reaction. You feel guilty because of all that you have. Don't feel guilty. You know, guilt is a it comes out of a place of judgment where you feel as if maybe God or even other people are judging you in some way, and so you feel guilty over that. There is no guilt. That's a false guilt. All right. Your experience of fear in whatever the circumstances are, well, that's your experience. That's what you're going through. And, God is not condemning or judging you because you feel fear and, you have all this stuff that He's blessed you with. No. You can be as rich as Bill Gates or Warren Buffett and still deal with all manner of anxiety disorders that have nothing to do with your material possessions. So, yeah, just know that He wants to set us all free from that kind of a thing. Let's see, who else? Any other questions? All right. If you do, please just type them in, and I'd be happy to address those before we close. One last thing I want to mention is that we've just launched a Christian community here on Facebook. It's called This Royal Life, and it's all about learning how to have the kind of quality of life that God actually wants for us. We talk all the time about how good of a father He is, but yet so many people, they've never experienced that. And they've even been told the opposite, that God is not that good, that you really can't trust Him. Well, there are many of us that have found that that's not true. And so we've launched this Christian community as a way to try to communicate that and provide a place where we all could learn and experience that, grow together, and all of that. So that's there. If you want to check it out, you can use that link, bit.ly/This Royal Life. Or on Facebook itself, you can just type in This Royal Life as one word into the search bar on the top of the Facebook page, and it'll pop up with that particular group. And you're absolutely welcome to join us and see what we're offering in the way of wisdom and help and support for each of us to just become the best that He wants us to be. It's just that simple. All right. Anything else? Any other questions? I don't see any other questions. Well, I just thank you so much for spending this time with me. I really do appreciate it. Again, if there are any further questions or things that you'd like to talk about, send me a Facebook message, and we can either do it that way or we can set up a phone call. I much prefer phone because it's a lot easier to communicate back and forth, and I'm not that fast on the old texting, all right? So thank you so very much. And if you're up Monday morning, join us for our Breakfast with Jesus devotional that we have at 8:30 Eastern right here on Facebook as well. So thanks again. Have an awesome weekend, and I hope to see some of you when we finally get set free. All right. Thanks again.